Hey everyone, this is Dan Vinkin with the UNI Family Business Center here at the University of Northern Iowa. Our guest today is Jerry Foster, founder and former CEO, owner of the Foster Group in Des Moines, Iowa. Jerry has done a lot of work in this I guess space of kind of life planning. I don't know exactly how I would call it. Maybe that isn't quite the right term, but certainly thinking about what do I do next with my life and that succession planning path from working, owning, managing your company to now what am I going to do next and making sure that that's intentional. And so that's going to be our topic for today with Jerry. Jerry, I'm really excited to have you with us. So thank you for joining us. And it's exciting, but maybe a little scary too when you've worked your whole life holding on to. And I've got my little chart. I don't know if this will show on the recording, but this is I know I drew up what you had presented to our legacy group, and I just thought it was really cool how you've outlined that foundational time of our lives up until our mid 20s, and then a big chunk of our life up to 60 is about, like you just said, our identity, who we are, what we um, a little bit of what we're taking from the world too, and then that 60 plus or wherever you want to put the number, but that third phase really spoke to me. And so I'm looking at it now as we talk, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about kind of how you advise clients or have advised business clients in the past when sometimes I call it the monkey bars of life, where you're not going to let go of the monkey bar you're on, holding on to until you know that you've got a decently firm grip on the next one.
Hmm.
I feel like business succession, age transition is somewhat like that for folks. If you're owning that company, your identity is tied to that company. All of your, all of who you are really is about leading this company, and then you move into this. All of a sudden, you're not that person anymore, or slowly over time, you're not that person anymore. How do you fill that void? And that's a lot of what third phase planning is about, I think.
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Well, I think that one of the big things that happens, Dan, is as we transition to that, and like you say, we're kind of moving away from that season of our life when we've been establishing that credibility, and actually, Arthur Brooks wrote a book called "From Strength to Strength," and an outstanding book where he talks about the two curves that we find ourselves, work curves and uh, curves of influence, and that kind of fits right into that chart that you just drew out that I do, where
Yeah,
there's 3 seasons. You put those two curves over the top of that, and you really begin to have an understanding of what goes on as we transition. But there is a period of grief as we move from that first curve, as Arthur Brooks talks, or the second season as I talk about it.
yeah,
There's a grief because we've spent so much time, what he calls building a resume. I mean, we're working on resume type of things that
yeah,
make just establish us in the community, and it's fluid, and it's always moving, and and like you just said, our entire, not our entire, but a lot of our self-worth and our value and how we see ourselves is tied up in what we do.
absolutely.
When we leave that behind, we leave it behind, that schedule, that constant being with the same people and doing the same
Yeah.
things. And now that's not there. It's really scary. And so one of the things that I talk about is just the grief. How do you grieve in a healthy way? And one of the ways you do is just by first identifying it and understanding that, okay, this is normal. I started transitioning from my business a few years ago, and I think I still feel or go through grief every day.
Yeah, I was
Uh,
just going to ask you if you could kind of, talk from a firsthand perspective too a little bit, because I know that you actually have had to, talk the talk and but walk the walk too of your
yeah,
own grieving process with your name on the door and everybody in the building kind of knowing, okay, this is the leader of our ship and that kind of thing, and how that, identifies you and brings, like you said, credibility to you. And then when you move away from that, how do you feel? How do you not become annoyance to your wife or your husband type of thing, you know? Can you talk a little bit about
Yeah.
maybe things
Yeah.
you learned there?
Well, like I say, it's that transition. You know, it's really the intentionality of not retiring from or transitioning from something, but transitioning or retiring to something. And that's one of the biggest mistakes that people in this transition phase don't think about. They just all they're thinking about is how to either wind down, shut down, kind of move on to the next season. And they've not thought about, well, what is it I'm going to? And so that's a huge part of it, is that for me, I grieve every day. I grieve things that were, but I have something I look forward to, and I'm moving towards new things. In fact, I find myself, and you've heard this, hundreds of times probably, but I find myself thinking, how in the world did I ever find time to work?
Yeah,
Because
I do.
I'm
Yeah,
so busy. I'm doing so many things.
right. And so just getting yourself out there, evaluating your skills and expertise and experiences and interests, I suppose, is part of that. And acknowledging that there is going to be some messiness or suckiness along the way, maybe too, a
Mm-hmm.
little bit. I did write that down too. You have to have something to retire to, not something to retire from. And thinking about things that way, if you really stop to do that, help. I mean, I'm assuming that helps you put some context around the fact that you are going into a new phase. And like one thing that I think about is, oh, I'm just going to go fishing every day, you know, and I can't wait for that time of my life. And I think I say that with not enough thought, obviously, and a little too flippantly. And then I'm like, well, what does that really look like if I'm not catching anything, or it's raining, or all of a sudden I just get bored of it? You know, holy crap, I'm going to find myself in a grieving
Right.
situation. And so I think it's incredibly important for people to plan for this phase and to know that it's not going to be just as simple as you're going to go to coffee every day and watch Wheel of Fortune and call it good or whatever. So, what are some of the things that you're doing in this third phase for yourself that you're finding rewarding, and how did you lead yourself to those spots?
Well, some of that points back to a really, I think, is one of the key um, objectives that I have, and just looking at life, kind of just a real key principle, and that is when we're walking through those three seasons, I've concluded that we have the opportunity to make a choice of one of three pathways that we can really choose to live predominantly in our life. And
Okay.
if you were to look at kind of this pathway, and there's this arrow that runs all the way down the pathway from birth to to the future. The path that goes right down the middle is what I call the path of indifference. So there you go. He's got my drawing right there. We probably
Yeah.
should put up a little PowerPoint presentation to
I'll
see it.
make sure that we highlight that when we do
Yeah,
the production. But
yeah. Well, we just that there's the pathway that runs right down the middle. It's the path of indifference. It's the default path. It's where most people find themselves living, primarily because they've not done what we're talking about here. They've not created a purpose and passion to their life. They're not really working towards anything specific. They just kind of maybe aimlessly go into retirement with no goals, and not that we have to take the same kind of intensity from that second season and third season, but without some purpose, without some focus, then we're aimless, and that's where that path of indifference comes in, and that's driven. I talked about by complacency. Complacency really sets in, and we just kind of think, oh, I've been there, done that, and I'm just not going to get engaged anymore. So that's the path of indifference, and I think that's where that it leads to a lot of depression, because we spent so much time in our second season on a mission to
Yeah.
do something of purpose, and now we don't. So that's a big issue. The second path I talked about is the path of indulgence. That's the one that goes down, and the path of indulgence is really driven by comparison. And I make really a clear understanding when I say indulgence. I'm not talking about enjoyment, because I think we work hard our whole life we accumulate assets, or in a retirement portfolio,
Yeah.
and we're supposed to enjoy those in our season of life.
Yeah.
But if we were driven by comparison, so that's comparison's the issue on that pathway to indulgence. If we're driven by comparison, it's never enough. No, whatever we have, our natural tendency is to compare to somebody who has more, or who's better at something, or has better circumstances, and so we're always comparing and needing more. We can never satisfy that insatiable desire to
Yeah.
just have more. It's just a human desire.
Yeah.
So I've heard it said. In fact, one of the participants in the workshop we did the other day came up to me, and she said that she'd heard that comparison is the thief of joy,
Yeah.
and that's really a powerful statement. Comparison just really does rob us of joy, because we keep wanting more and more and more, and so we just have to be careful on that path. And then the third path I talked about is the path of influence. And I really believe, Dan, that that's where most people want to live their life. It's why we worked all those years. We wanted to have impact. We wanted to influence, and we don't want that to stop. It just starts to look different. And so, but the path of influence is really fed by our ability to be content. Now, content and complacency can be really, there's a tricky
In
line
line.
between those two. I'm not talking about just saying I'm all right, I'm done, and I'm just gonna I'm coast.
Yeah.
Content means I'm content with my circumstances. I'm content with who I am, content with the opportunities that are in front of me. I'm content, but now what I'm going to do is I'm going to be all I can be with what I have and the circumstances that I'm living. And when we can get our head and our heart around that contentment issue, I really think we're in a place now where we can really establish some meaningful objectives and goals during that season.
Yeah. So for yourself and for the folks that you advise and work with, how do you, what are some first steps into making sure that they kind of, or that you do pursue that life of contentment along the track of influence in that third
Yeah.
phase? What are some practical kind of well, for me, I did X, or I found Y to be a way to help keep me off the comparison track, or the complacency track. Do you have any thoughts on that you would want our
Yeah.
viewers to hear?
One of the big issues there is just the whole the intentionality is first, is to walk into that season and say, okay, I'm going to be intentional. I'm not going to let life happen to me.
Yeah.
I'm going to be more intentional to make things happen. Once again, we can't control all circumstances, but we can control some things. So intentionality. One of the things that we'll walk people through, and when I'm coaching somebody or encouraging them, we've got a simple questionnaire that we can just say, hey, when you think back over the last 30 years of working, and even beyond that, 30, 40 years of working, even beyond that,
Yep.
beyond, back to when you're a kid, what were the, what are the things that you just enjoyed most? What do you remember just saying, wow, I really love that?
Yeah.
What are the things that give you energy, that just energize you? Not the things that suck the life out of you, but the things that energize you, because, there are all kinds of people around us that especially when they hear, oh, you're retiring, now they think you got all kinds of time to
Yeah.
help them,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they're asking you to do things that can literally suck the life out of you. And I look at this season of life. I heard somebody once say, John Stanley is a friend of mine, say that this season of life is when we had the freedom and flexibility to do what we want, when we want, with who we want.
So
And
that's kind of that power to say no too, a little bit.
exactly, it's exactly, say no to the wrong things so that you can say yes to the right things.
Okay.
So that means really taking some time to say, what do I really want to
Yeah.
do?
So then what are those things, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And here's the other thing too, is find something that you thought you'd always loved doing, but just never had the time to do it, and find a way to do it. So for me, I stumbled into painting. I started going to a
Okay.
class with this retired middle school art teacher.
Sure.
And so I go with about 4 or 5 other people we're all in our 60s, and the teachers in their 60s, and we go and we sit in her basement. She got a studio there, and we drink wine and paint every Tuesday night for 2 hours. And it's opened up for me just a whole new area of interest for me. So it's it's just finding that something. What is it? Something that you've
Yeah.
ever done before?
Yeah. I think that one thing that you talked about too last week was, a lot of this comes around the word that you just said, which is intentionality. And
Yes.
I think it's far too easy, frankly, to not be intentional, to just let life happen, frankly. And one thing that I've really picked up from your speaking and the work that your books is that intentionality part. And not that I want this to become a how to live your best self podcast or anything, but for the business owners that are listening, and for the family businesses that are with us, um, I want them to think about that intentionality of, that plays itself into lots of ways. It plays itself into their succession planning too. Then, and can you talk a little bit about your own succession plan, and maybe we'll wrap up there with this one. And
Yeah.
I'd love to have you back on again, actually, Perry. But how did that go for you as far as building a company over many years, putting your name on the sign, and then facing that season of transition from framework to finish, I guess is how you say it.
Yeah.
How did that
Well,
go?
I got a little bit of a jump start on it back when I was 55. So I'm 68 now. So 55. So about 13 years ago, I was diagnosed with a really rare form of cancer. It's a melanoma in the eye. It's a choroidal or ocular melanoma, and
Okay.
it's got a direct pathway. Over 90% of the time when it metastasizes, it goes directly to the liver, and it's deadly. And so there was about, when I was diagnosed with that, just suddenly diagnosed with it, they basically, there was a 50% mortality rate in the first 5 years. Well, when you're running a business, that forces you into this mindset of, all right, what am I going to do? What are we going to do with this business if I'm not around?
Yeah.
And so we all know that we instinctively know that could happen to any of us, because we all know we're going to die.
Yeah.
100%. I can guarantee one thing: 100% of the people listening to this are going to die.
Yeah.
Question
Yeah.
is when. But when you're faced with that reality, it really kicks you into a more intentional process. So I really started the process 13 years ago, and it was a slow process, but I knew the end game. And the end game is the company had to function without me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really look at it and consider it a huge blessing to being diagnosed with that cancer, because it did a couple things for me. It gave me a picture where I needed to be and kind of the jump start with my business, but it also gave me a picture and jump started me with what I wanted my personal life to look like.
Sure.
Suddenly, I heard someone say that when death is certain, life becomes real. And and I was looking at the certainty of death, which we all do. Like I said, we all do that, but we don't really think about it that way until it's really facing us. A diagnosis
That's
puts
right
us.
there. Yeah.
So I started that transition, and then through the process, we really actively began to look at who the next leader of the company would be.
Mm-hmm.
And it was we had a consultant came in and worked with us, and we considered going outside. We looked at candidates inside, and that process brought us to the right person about 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay.
And in that process, then I then had the opportunity to kind of mentor and coach and phase out. But here is the key. The key is the day the day we announced him as the CEO of the company. I literally, not figuratively, I literally, as a show of confidence in that, handed him the keys, and I said, "It's yours." And now I'd had warm up to get him to the
Yeah.
place where I had the confidence to do that,
Sure.
but
Because of that intentionality and
it was
planning.
intentionality. And so here's one thing that did help is probably back in early 90s, mid 90s, I went to a business coach, and this business coach I learned a ton of things from him. But one of the things I learned is that I got rid of my office. And his philosophy on that is that if you're the kind of person that needs to be leading the company out and doing things, your office becomes a trap for everybody to put the things that they can't figure out on your desk to figure out. He says, so if
Okay.
you don't have an office, they don't have any place to put it, and they got to find you.
Yeah, that makes
so,
sense.
so when I would come into the building, what I would do is I'd go up to our receptionist or our assistant and say, okay, who's out today? And that's who I became that day. I went and sat in their office and worked there, or worked in the conference room, or worked in Starbucks, or whatever it is. And so I kind of built the business with that kind of a kind of a culture.
Sure.
So when I handed the keys over to our new CEO, I handed over and I said, I'm not going to be here. I'll come in and meet occasionally with you, but this company has to have your personality. You need to lead. And it was remarkable how easy that was to happen. And now I probably have only met, well, I bet at least half of the company, if not more, have been hired since that happened. So so it's not like they're
Yeah.
waiting for me to make a decision. I transitioned out. I still have a place there. I've always said that you want to leave at a time when they want you to stay, and they still invite you back because they need your advice. They want your wisdom of all the experiences. You don't want to be that guy in the corner office where they say, "When's he going to leave? When's he going to leave?" And
That's a great point here as we, wrap is thinking about how do we how do we leave with them wanting more type of thing, right? Or
yeah,
whatever.
and that's something we can control. We
Yeah,
can control that, and so it's a fun place because now I really feel like I'm still welcome
contributing.
and
Yeah,
needed, even though
yeah.
I'm hardly ever there.
And they're not, concerned that you're showing up or something like that,
Right,
right?
right,
Yeah,
exactly.
I think that that's all too often sometimes the current gen that when they stick around too long, then that starts to, like these curves that you mentioned from the strengths book that you were talking about, there's a curve up, but there's a curve down too. And if you aren't careful, exiting on that curve down too late is going to really be detrimental, right?
Well, and Arthur Brooks, I think I said this quote. I think I might even have it right here. Um, he made the comment in that. Here we go, right here. I love this. And so he said, success often means knowing when to walk away, not hanging on to the first curve too long.
Okay.
And I really like that because that's what our tendency, especially if it's our company, we built it, or we're a second generation or third generation, there's a sense of, I need to hang on to it as long as I can. And so, our
There,
success is knowing when to walk away.
there definitely is. Yeah. I think that's a great point that we can kind of close with here for today, Jerry. You covered a lot of ground, of course. But like I said, I'd love to have you back for a part two of this conversation because it is so important and impactful for our family. So, like once again, our guest has been Jerry Foster, founder of the Foster Group in Des Moines, a wealth management firm. Jerry has a lot of experience, obviously firsthand experience of running, growing, operating, and exiting his own company, and now doing a lot of work with other families on navigating through life and planning for, as he calls it, and I love the term, the third phase of life. So, Jerry, thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah,
It's great. Hope you have a great rest of your day.
enjoy. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Never Go Against the Family, a podcast produced by the University of Northern Iowa Family Business Center. You can find more information about the center, membership, and upcoming events at unifamilybusinesscenter.com. As Vito Corleone advises, never go against the family.